New York-based attorney Jennifer Bonjean has made a name for herself by taking on high-profile yet unpopular clients. She famously represented Bill Cosby on his appeal before the Pennsylvania Supreme Court concerning his 2018 sexual assault conviction, which ultimately got overturned, and Cosby walked out of prison a free man. Now she's taking on a new client, R. Kelly, who was convicted in September of sex trafficking and racketeering charges and currently faces life in prison for those crimes. Joining me now is Kelly's new legal counsel, Jennifer Bonjean herself. Counselor, happy to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Yodi.
Okay, Jennifer, so I'm going to start this conversation by asking you the most obvious question, one I'm sure you get all the time. Why would you defend R. Kelly?
I approach every case the same way. And I look and I say, has there been a miscarriage of justice? And in my mind, a miscarriage of justice occurs when the government oversteps, when they overreach, when they violate someone's constitutional right to a fair trial. And then I ask myself, is there anything I can do about it? Can I possibly get this individual some type of remedy, some type of relief? And when I looked at R. Kelly's case, I found that both of those things were true. And so I had no reservations about taking R. Kelly's case. What I see was a travesty of justice and how the process worked. And when the process doesn't work, the outcomes are not fair, they're not righteous. And as a result, I took R. Kelly's case. And I pass on cases, but this is a case that I felt satisfied both of those requirements.
And that's because you think that the government abused the RICO statute in order to get around issues of statute of limitations, right? And so for people who may think I'm talking legalese here, there were accusations for decades against R. Kelly. Those accusations, cases, whatever it may be, were old, and so they couldn't be tried in a court of law. But to get around that, prosecutors used this statute, the RICO, which most people would associate with like big drug lords, to get around that in order to get R. Kelly on these charges. That's what you're talking about when you're talking about a miscarriage of justice, correct?
I mean, it's more than that. First of all, the government could have charged R. Kelly along many years ago, many times over, with whatever crimes they believe that he committed. Now, they didn't do that many times. We know there was a case back in I think in the mid-aughts out of Cook County, and he was found not guilty of that case. But the government could have brought charges, and they chose not to for whatever reasons. And now they have brought charges against him under the RICO, which, yes, was designed to get at criminal enterprises, mafia, large drug operations run by gangs. And they are doing that, yes, to plead around the statute of limitations. But even more problematic in my mind is they use this statute in order to overwhelm the jury with other crimes evidence or other bad act evidence. It doesn't even have to be another crime. So really what they're doing is putting someone's life on trial. And that ends up being not really a fair fight. It's one thing to defend against a specific charge. That is fair. But when you bring in these crimes, these alleged crimes under the RICO Act, you're really putting someone in a position where they have to defend 30 years of their entire life. And that, I think, is not a fair fight, because it doesn't give, you don't have fair notice on what they're coming at you with. There's allegations that date back 30 years. And there are sometimes it's very difficult for particularly high-profile people. 30 years. Oh, do I even know this person? Where was I? How can I defend against that? So it's not a fair fight. And then they brought claims under the Mann Act. And the Mann Act has been historically problematic, and it was no less problematic in this case as well. I believe that the government misused those statutes in order to gain convictions against R. Kelly that were not fair. And there's much that the jury didn't hear that they should have heard.
Jennifer, I'm a lawyer too, so I understand what you're saying, and I'm able to think about this in a logical, obviously legal way, setting aside my emotion. But But for the lay person, the person that's watching right now, and who's watched our coverage of R. Kelly's trial, who believe that he's finally being held accountable for abusing black women and girls, they don't care about a fair fight, right? They be creative. They're probably thinking, hey, however way the government could do it, they finally did, and it's done. I don't care. Explain why it matters to everyone ultimately that we essentially, there's a checks and balances when it comes to prosecution.
Yeah, that's right. And I can appreciate that there's emotions that run high, and people don't necessarily value how the government goes about getting what they consider to be justice. But when the government runs amok, right now it's R. Kelly, tomorrow it's somebody else. And maybe it's someone you care about tomorrow. Maybe it's a loved one of yours. To keep the government honest and to keep them in check, the system has to work for all of us. The R. Kellys of the world, the Bill Cosbys of the world, and then people that we don't even know. And so my job is to make sure the government does it the fair way. And if they didn't do it fair, it just doesn't count. It's like if you cheat during a football game and you want to declare victory, you can't because you cheated. And it is my job to hold the government responsible and to hold their feet to the fire. And I believe that was not done. It hasn't been done, but we're hoping to do it.
So, I've had this conversation with colleagues for years, and in fact, we had a conversation about it on the show a few weeks back about the blowback that attorneys risk facing from the public over who they choose to represent. I get tweets from viewers asking why I keep inviting certain lawyers who represented less than desirable clients, and of course that question that we all get, defense lawyers get, how can you defend a guilty person? I'm curious, how would you respond? What would be your response to that question?
Well, first of all, let me start by saying that that is a general question I get all the time. I don't know whether it's specific to R. Kelly or not, and I'm not here to, I don't trust the verdict that came back in R. Kelly's case. So I'm not going to say he's guilty until I believe that there is a fair process. I don't rely on verdicts where the process was not fair. So let me make that clear. I do not believe that the verdict is a reliable indicator of whether R. Kelly is in fact factually guilty. But to your general question of how do you represent unpopular people? How do you represent people that the media has already convicted? How do I represent them? I'm a defense attorney, and that's what I do. And I believe to my core that the government needs to be held needs to be held accountable, and when they don't go about this process in a fair and just way, that is a miscarriage of justice, and it affects all of us. And I guess I just really believe in that principle. It just doesn't matter to me whether it's R. Kelly or Bill Cosby or any number of wrongfully convicted people that I have represented over the years. It just does not matter. It's all the same to me, because if the system doesn't work for one, it doesn't work for any of us. And I guess I'm just really focused on that principle. And it doesn't, my view is if you're a defense attorney and you can't get with that idea, then, maybe find a different career. It's really one of the fundamental tenets of what we do.
Jennifer, I wish we had more time. I could talk about this all day with you, and I'm hoping that you do come back. But I've got time for just one question.
Sure.
As women attorneys, we're assumed to have more empathy for accusers. And so there's a lot more pressure on us, on who we choose to represent than, say, male attorneys. Is that fair?
Well, I think it's a little ridiculous. I mean, women are capable of anything, right? We're capable of being president. We're capable of being vice president. We're also capable of bad. We're capable of lying. We're capable of the gamut of things. Why? Because we're human beings. And to think that we are either this, this virtuous, perfect person versus evil, we're capable of all of it. So to say that we somehow have a greater ability to be, empathic, I think once we go down that road, that leads to a bad place. women and men are capable of all types of emotions, motivations, and they can be incentivized by anything. And that's just how I view it. So no, I guess I don't think it's fair.
There you have it. Jennifer Bonjean, pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so very much for your time tonight.